Hello, and thank you for listening to the Testing the Spirits podcast. We're going to be talking about Jimmy Swaggart one more time because the podcast from yesterday, I got a lot of comments. I want to respond to those comments, and it really does highlight the point that I've been talking about. In the modern church, in churches today, it really does seem like it's considered worse to judge evil than to do evil. So I want to read some of these comments. A lot of people said Jimmy Swaggart was a man of God. Don't judge. Don't judge. You're not allowed to talk about him. How dare you talk about him? He repented. He was used great. He was restored by God. He was used greatly by God. And his fans came out in force in the comment section. So I want to address this, but just as far as judging goes, you will notice I didn't judge in the ultimate sense. People said about Jimmy Swaggart, God is his judge. Okay, yes, God will determine where a person spends eternity. I never commented on that, but we can certainly comment about right and wrong. After all, Jesus said in the Gospel of John, chapter 7, verse 24, Jesus said to his followers that we are to make righteous judgments. Also, the Apostle Paul said in 1 Corinthians 6, 2 and 3, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Do you not know that we shall judge angels? How much more things that pertain to this life? So if you look at the Bible, we are actually supposed to make judgments, because what is a judgment? It's determining what's true and what's false. You're saying, hey, that behavior, that's right and that's wrong, and you make judgments every single day. We are called to test the spirits, right? So people have really fallen for this lie that, oh, you're never supposed to judge. In other words, a person can go out, like the Michael Tate thing. He can go out, commit all sorts of terrible sins. He can even abuse people, potentially even committing crimes, and no one is allowed to say anything about it. I mean, nobody really believes that. Otherwise, we would open up the prisons and just let murderers and everyone just go free because, hey, you can't judge. I mean, we have people with these black robes called judges, and they sentence people, and you probably think that's right. But see, if somebody says something about your favorite preacher, well, judge not. Well, that's not the way it works. And let me also point out, we have a complete book of the Bible called Judges. Okay, so another verse, 1 Corinthians 2:15, Paul says, the spiritual man judges all things. So let's get into the comments. What are people saying about Jimmy Swaggart? So it's very, very common to see these statements. And yes, I realize Jesus said in Matthew 7:1, judge not that you be not judged. But if you look at the context, he's talking about judging hypocritically. Take the beam out of your own eye, then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. So don't judge someone when you're doing the same thing or even worse. And then Jesus calls people dogs and swine, I think in verses 5 and 6. So obviously he's not, that's a judgment. He's not saying don't ever judge. And then Paul in Romans 14, I believe it is, he says, do not judge your brother. Those are things that aren't even wrong. So disputable issues, matters of conscience, don't judge when they're not even doing anything wrong. So a lot of misunderstanding. But yes, Jimmy Swaggart obviously was 100% disqualified from being a pastor. Even before you get into his doctrine, which we are called to test the spirits, he was totally disqualified because he was busted multiple times soliciting prostitutes. So his denomination didn't believe that he was penitent, so they kicked him out, and he thumbed his nose at church discipline and kept on preaching anyways. And yeah, he was completely disqualified. According to 1 Timothy 3, a pastor must be above reproach. He must have a good reputation. And the fact of the matter is that Jimmy Swaggart probably had one of the worst reputations of any televangelist throughout history. Maybe Jim Bakker and Benny Hinn have a worse, reputation, but it's just amazing what people are saying. Alan Ortberg responded and said this, Jimmy Swaggart's sins are none of your business. So apparently he bought into the supposed revelation that Jimmy Swaggart got from God. God told Jimmy, supposedly, Did God really tell him this? Of course not. But Jimmy Swaggart is using God's name in vain. He claims that God told me to tell you it's none of your business. And now this guy, Alan, is just repeating Jimmy's words. Deborah asks, why did you do this video, or why didn't you do this video when he was alive? You know, the idea, a couple people said this, Jimmy can't defend himself. You should have done this when he was alive. Well, Jimmy Swaggart wasn't going to respond to this video no matter when I did it. And then she talks about how the Lord restored him to ministry. It's like, no, the Lord did not restore Jimmy Swaggart to ministry. Jimmy thumbed his nose at church discipline. It's sort of like when John Hagee was kicked out of his denomination because of adultery. Both men just, they got caught, they ignored it, they thumbed their nose at church discipline. They got kicked out of their denomination, but what did they do? They just went out and started a brand new church and pretended like it never happened. And of course, with Swaggart, he got caught again and again and again. So that's why his reputation is much worse. So here's the thing. A lot of the people making comments, they clearly did not watch my entire podcast, because I actually didn't focus on the scandals. I don't want to focus on the scandals, but that's what everyone's talking about. I actually said in my podcast that I want to focus on the doctrine. What did Jimmy teach? But almost nobody responded to that. I got a ton of comments, judge not, how dare you, but I don't think anybody, or almost nobody, responded to actually the doctrine of what he taught that was so clearly false, that Jimmy Swaggart got this new revelation that he understood the message of the cross even more than the apostles. I mean, that's crazy. So nobody could deny the truthfulness, really, of what I was saying. They just attacked me and just, the judge not thing. So a few more comments. Another person said, yeah, why are you talking about this now? He's not even buried yet. But here's why I did it now. This has nothing to do with personal attacks or insults, but his teaching has massive influence. Millions of people follow Jimmy Swaggart's doctrine. So now is when everyone's talking about it. Now is when people are going online and searching Jimmy Swaggart. So everyone's searching him online, and now is the time that people are looking him up, and they're listening now to his music and sermons. So there are people who haven't thought about Jimmy Swaggart in 20 years, but now they're looking him up and listening to his sermons. So in a month from now, nobody's going to care, or in a month from now, people who did look him up and started listening to him will already be sucked in by his false teaching. So this is about protecting the flock. Somebody says, as a pastor, you should just be preaching the gospel. Well, I do that every week. But as a shepherd, it's my job to, yes, feed the flock, but it's also a shepherd's job to protect the flock. So what's the title of the podcast? Testing the Spirits. We are actually commanded to do this. Well, I don't like what you're doing in this podcast. Well, I'm commanded to do this. 1 John 4:1. The Apostle John writes, Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. So just wrapping this up, I could, read every comment, and most people who commented did agree with me, but there were a lot of Jimmy Swaggart defenders. And just to summarize, yeah, it was pretty much just judge not, just in, different words repeated again and again. But please understand, the mainstream media, when they report on Jimmy Swaggart, they're almost all talking about the prostitution scandals, or how he was cousins with, Mickey Gilley and Jerry Lee Lewis. I don't care about that. I care about what he taught and how people are led into error by his teaching. The prostitution scandals are noteworthy because it speaks to his character and his being disqualified. So that does matter. But I care about his doctrine, especially his supposed revelation from God about the cross. And I just want to repeat this because this needs to sink in for some people. Again, hardly anyone that defended Jimmy Swaggart none of them really addressed this, how he claimed in 1997 to receive this revelation from God, to where now Jimmy Swaggart, the church has fallen away from the message of the cross, and Jimmy Swaggart is being called by God to restore the message. And Jimmy Swaggart truly understands the message of the cross when the Apostle Paul didn't. Even the apostles didn't understand truly, the message of the cross, but Jimmy Swaggart understands it better than even the authors of Scripture. I mean, the pride, just think about that. The pride of such a claim is just off the charts. I mean, let's get real. If the true gospel or the full gospel of the cross was not truly or fully revealed until 1997, and nobody truly understood it or fully understood it until God revealed it to Jimmy Swaggart, that's cultic. That is totally and completely cultic. It sounds eerily similar to the founder of the Mormons, Joseph Smith, and what he claimed. So yeah, if someone is following Jimmy Swaggart, pastors have every reason to be concerned about his teaching. But again and again, the response from his followers, just don't talk about this. You have no right to talk about this. Judge not. And of course, Jimmy Swaggart, the irony is that Jimmy Swaggart issued many harsh and heavy judgments from his pulpit. But that's different, And this is really the effect of false teaching. Now his followers are acting hypocritically, doing likewise. So when a guy like me comes out and talks about his doctrine, and nobody argued the truthfulness of what I was saying, but they respond ironically by saying, judge not, and then they continue to speak condemning words against me. So I speak the truth about Jimmy Swaggart, and how dare you judge not, and then they totally condemn me. And it's like, are you even listening to yourself? Some of the comments were so bad, so nasty, I had to delete them or block the people making them. But they're just following their leader. They're just doing what Jimmy Swaggart did. They're operating the same way. And anyone who disagreed with Jimmy Swaggart, or certainly anyone who spoke out against him, certainly the way he acted is like, to disagree with Jimmy Swaggart was to disagree with God himself. So in conclusion, we have every right to pass judgment in the sense of determining what's true and what's false, what is right and what's wrong. Pastors soliciting prostitutes, getting busted, being kicked out of their denomination, just keep on preaching, getting busted again, soliciting another prostitute, just God says it's none of your business. He just keeps doing it. Corruption, defiance, no accountability, false doctrine, arguably a false gospel. Yes, we have every right to say to people, hey, this is not a man you should be following. Why? Because we care about people and we don't want to see them messed up spiritually. So we have every right to test the spirits. Okay, 1 John 4:1, that's the title of the podcast, Test the Spirits. Why? Because many false prophets have gone out into the world. Just one more verse. The Apostle Paul said in 1 Thessalonians 5:21 and 22, test all things and hold fast to that which is good. My friends, the gospel was not lost until 1997. The message of God's grace towards sinners has been preached from the days of the apostles until now. And if there's someone watching right now, you've never believed the gospel. The book of Romans 10, verse 9. The Apostle Paul did understand the message of the cross, and here's what he said, that if we would confess with our mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in our hearts that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And then the next step is to get baptized and to join a good local Bible-believing church where there is accountability. Yes, accountability. For us, we need accountability. Also accountability for the pastor. We all need accountability, and we all need encouragement. We all need to gather together. Iron sharpens iron. So I hope that you know the Lord, you believe the gospel, get baptized, be in a good church, build one another up, and yes, warn people against false prophets and false teachers. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, may the Lord be with you. Have a great day.